Prepare to uncover the deepest and most mysterious secrets of the Bible. Have you ever heard of the Ophanim? These enigmatic entities appear in the pages of the Old Testament, playing a pivotal role in the stories of Abraham and Jacob. But here's the twist. What you think you know about angels and celestial beings might not be as it seems. Embark on this journey of discovery and get ready for a quick reward of knowledge that challenges conventional beliefs. After all, who are the Ophanim really? The answer will surprise you. Stay with us and unravel the mystery. In ancient Hebrew, the word Ophanim translates literally to wheels. The singular version of the word is Ophan. Interestingly, we find references to wheels in various passages of the Old Testament, and Ophanim could allude to both the conventional wheels of a chariot and those of a cart. Now you might be wondering, who was the prophet who beheld these enigmatic beings, the Ophanim? The answer takes us back to the year 597 BC, during the conquest by Nebuchadnezzar. Ezekiel, among the 10,000 prisoners captured in Jerusalem, was one of those exiled to Babylon. It was precisely in this context that Ezekiel had an experience that would shape his life as a prophet, a vision of extraordinary proportions. Defining the Ophanim as Ezekiel saw them is a challenging task, as it requires considering the entirety of the revelation. God chose to open the heavens before Ezekiel's eyes, and the description of this inaugural vision is one of the most enigmatic and complex passages of the Old Testament. Ezekiel begins by situating the moment when he had this extraordinary vision. In the 30th year of his life, on the 5th day of the 4th month, he was among the exiles by the river Chebar in Babylon. It was there that the heavens opened before him, revealing divine visions that defy human understanding. Ezekiel described this experience in striking words. On the 5th day of the month, which was in the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly to Ezekiel, the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar. And the hand of the Lord was upon him there. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud with flashing fire and a brightness around it, and in its midst, something like gleaming amber in the midst of the fire. Ezekiel struggles to describe something that transcends human understanding, resorting to comparisons to convey an idea of what he saw. He witnesses the arrival of a terrifying storm, with lightning and fire advancing from the north. 4 luminous entities emerge from the cloud, each radiating an intense light. Despite having human-like features, these entities are completely distinct from humans. Each of them displays 4 different faces: a human face, a lion's face, an ox's face, and an eagle's face. Although not named directly in Ezekiel 1, they are later identified as cherubim in chapter 10. This fascinating vision takes us into a universe of mystery and symbolism, where the Ophanim, or cherubim, play a key role in understanding the complex biblical narrative. Ezekiel, through his impressive vision, invites us to explore the limits of our understanding and to delve into the depths of the divine. After contemplating the cherubim, Ezekiel turned his gaze to the wheels that were before each of the 4 faces of these extraordinary beings. The wheels resembled those of a chariot, but their nature was singular and intriguing. To comprehend what Ezekiel witnessed, we can turn to the modern concept of a gyroscope, a tool that helps us visualize the uniqueness of these divine wheels. Ezekiel was facing the challenge of describing the indescribable, a task that involved concepts that were beyond conventional human language. He was trying to shape something that could move in any direction without needing to turn, a truly incomprehensible characteristic. This vision reminds us that Ezekiel was dealing with something that completely transcended our everyday reality. In chapter 1, verses 15 to 21, Ezekiel presents us with fascinating details about the appearance and movement of the mysterious wheels. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their workmanship was like sparkling beryl, and all 4 had the same form. Their movement was as if the wheels were within wheels. When they moved, they could go in any of the 4 directions without turning. The rims of these wheels were awe-inspiring and were full of eyes all around. As the living creatures moved, the wheels moved with them. When the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose also. Wherever the spirit wanted to go, they went, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When the living creatures moved, the wheels moved with them. When the living creatures stopped, the wheels stopped. And when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose along with them. Ezekiel, in narrating this extraordinary vision, describes a constant interaction between the wheels and the cherubim. The wheels moved in perfect synchrony with the celestial beings, following their directions. The prophet realized that this vision was a manifestation of the Spirit of God permeating the entire event. Furthermore, the eyes adorning the rims of the wheels symbolized the omniscience of God, representing his total awareness. He sees and knows everything. This great book of Ezekiel begins with a powerful vision in which the prophet is called by God to be his messenger and watchman for the Hebrew exiles. This vision marks the beginning of a series of 4 foundational visions throughout the book. And Ezekiel, with his visionary skill, graces us with vivid details of these divine events. By resorting to analogies and impressive images, Ezekiel offers readers a fascinating yet terrifying vision. The imposing wheels, the living creatures, the surrounding fire, and the eyes on the rims of the wheels create an image that transcends our understanding. This portrayal is a powerful illustration of God's providence, operating constantly and intricately, never erring and never delayed, a divine presence that is always in action. Ezekiel, in narrating this extraordinary vision, describes a constant interaction between the wheels and the cherubim. The wheels moved in perfect sync with the celestial beings, following their direction. The prophet realized that this vision was a manifestation of the Spirit of God, permeating the entire event. Moreover, the eyes that adorned the edges of the wheels symbolized the omniscience of God, representing his total awareness. He sees and knows everything. This great book of Ezekiel begins with a powerful vision in which the prophet is called by God to be his messenger and sentinel to the Hebrew exiles. This vision marks the start of a series of 4 foundational visions throughout the book, and Ezekiel, with his visionary skill, provides us with vivid details of these divine events. By resorting to analogies and stunning imagery, Ezekiel offers the readers a fascinating and simultaneously terrifying vision. The imposing wheels, the living creatures, the surrounding fire, and the eyes on the edges of the wheels form an image that transcends our understanding. This representation is a powerful illustration of God's providence, operating constantly and intricately, never failing and never delayed, a divine presence always in action. What Ezekiel witnessed and attempted to describe in this passage is indeed challenging to visualize, as it involves a grand and divine image. We can surmise he was before a representation of God's throne, transported by a magnificent vehicle with 4 wheels, often called the Ophanim. This entire vision is characterized by a state of constant movement and uninterrupted activity, and nothing seems to be at rest. The wheels and their complex mechanisms appear capable of moving in any direction, providing a sense of incredible agility and versatility. Yet this mobility does not result in chaos or disorder, but in a harmonious and coordinated movement. The presence of eyes adorning the edges of the wheels is akin to John's description of the cherubim, suggesting an exceptional level of knowledge and intelligence. This vision of the Ophanim is also similarly mentioned in Ezekiel 10, reinforcing the importance and depth of Ezekiel's experience. He was summoned to understand that God's throne, or the divine chariot throne, was in constant motion. The passages suggest that the divine throne was placed upon the wheels, that is, the Ophanim, and propelled by 4 angels. The complex arrangement of the wheels, with wheels within wheels at crossed angles, allowed the throne to move in any direction, eliminating the need for turning. Although the scriptures do not explicitly mention the Ophanim as a class of angelic beings, Jewish apocryphal writers identified them as such, including them in their hierarchies of angels, alongside the seraphim and cherubim. This interpretation highlights the fascination that the Ophanim have generated over time, and how these profound visions have inspired the imagination of many. Regardless of being considered angelic beings or a divinely powered mechanism of multidimensional transport, the important aspect is the role they play in revealing God's glory. Ezekiel's vision shows us God's complete dominion over the entire cosmos. Just as the Spirit of God guides the cherubim, that same Spirit dwells in the Ophanim, and the eyes covering the wheels and the cherubim symbolize God's omniscience. God is portrayed as omniscient and omnipresent, manifesting his presence in all things. The unusual and memorable visions that God granted to Ezekiel served to remind everyone of the holiness and divine power, even in times of exile and adversity. The central message was clear. Regardless of the circumstances, God remains on the throne, ready to handle each situation and govern with authority over all creation. Number 2 in our biblical discovery journey is the Behemoth, a mysterious creature mentioned in the book of Job. The story begins with the narrative of a prosperous man named Job, who lived in the land of Uz, surrounded by a large family and vast herds of sheep. Job was known for his integrity and righteousness, always committed to doing what was right, with unwavering devotion to God. God praises Job's virtues in front of Satan, who dares to argue that Job's righteousness was merely the result of divine favors. Satan challenges God to allow him to torment Job to test this bold claim, but God sets the condition that Job's life must not be taken. Job's suffering begins when he receives a series of reports in a single day, informing him that his sheep herds, servants, and even his 10 children were lost, stolen by invading thieves, or victims of natural disasters. Faced with such misfortune, Job tears his clothes and shaves his head in a gesture of deep sorrow, but his faith in God remains unshaken. He continues to praise God in his prayers, despite the bleak circumstances. Satan returns to heaven and is given another opportunity to test Job. This time, Job is afflicted with severe skin sores that torment him. His wife, in despair, urges him to curse God, give up, and end his own life. However, Job resists the pressure and struggles to endure his anguish. The trials push Job to the limit, and he becomes resentful, anxious, and tormented. He questions God's justice, which allows the wicked to prosper while he and other honest people suffer. Job longs for a physical encounter with God to protest against his apparent injustice. At the climax of the story, God decides to intervene and respond to Job. After Job has prayed to God for answers on 36 occasions, his wish is finally granted. God communicates with Job amid a storm on 2 occasions, and the way God speaks to him is surprising. At this point, the narrative of Job takes on a more humorous and revealing tone, but also deeply instructive. Job's encounter with God in the storm brings a series of important lessons about divine nature, human humility, and our limited understanding of God's purpose. It is a moment of profound reflection and revelation in Job's story, marking the climax of his journey of faith and suffering. Indeed, Job's encounter with God is marked by a profound revelation of divine greatness and human insignificance. God, in the first part of his response to Job, emphasizes his position as the supreme creator and ruler of the universe. He describes his sovereignty over all creation and questions whether Job can even begin to match his magnificent work of creation and maintenance of the world. God concludes his first response by reminding Job of the impertinence of demanding explanations from God, thus making Job feel humbly small before his greatness. In the second part of his response, God again talks about his creatures and highlights the majesty of the Behemoth. Job, in chapter 40, verses 15 to 24, describes this impressive creature in remarkable detail. The Behemoth is portrayed as a beast of colossal size, feeding on grass like an ox. Its strength lies in its hips and stomach muscles, and its tail is compared to a cedar. Its bones are like beams of bronze, and its ribs like bars of iron. It is presented as the first of God's ways, a creation that only God himself could approach with a sword. The Behemoth is depicted as a creature that dwells in the mountains and feeds on the gifts of nature. It finds refuge under the lotus trees, surrounded by willows by the brook. Even when the Jordan River rages, the Behemoth remains undisturbed, confident, and unshakable. The description of the Behemoth is shrouded in mystery, and scholars have debated its identity and nature over the centuries. Although there is no absolute consensus on the precise nature of this creature, one thing is clear: the Behemoth is a representation of the grandeur of God's creation and the human inability to rival the Creator. The Hebrew word behemoth suggests an augmentative of behemah, meaning beast, indicating a great beast. This magnificent description serves to further emphasize Job's humility before the grandeur of God and his creation, reinforcing the power and majesty of the Creator over all the earth. You've highlighted a fundamental point of Christian faith, which is the belief in the creation of all things by God, as stated in the book of John, chapter 1, verse 3. This passage emphasizes that everything that exists was created by God, and that he is superior to everything he created. Creation is a manifestation of God's power and sovereignty, and all three persons of the divinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, were involved in the act of creation. Regarding the identity of the Behemoth mentioned in the book of Job, it's interesting to note that throughout history, different theories have been proposed to identify it. Some people believe that the Behemoth could be a hippopotamus, while others suggest it might be an elephant. Both theories have their arguments, but the description of Behemoth as a creature with a tail that moves like a cedar doesn't seem to fit well with the anatomy of an elephant, which has a relatively small tail. The mention of Behemoth's mouth drinking the furious Jordan River also raises questions, as hippos are known for their presence in rivers and water areas. However, the description of the creature as something too large to be tamed by humans suggests it is not an ordinary animal. Regardless of the precise identity of the Behemoth, the main point emphasized in the account is the grandeur of God's creation and the human limitation in fully understanding the divine purpose. God prompts Job to reflect on creation, and then introduces Leviathan as another mysterious and terrifying creature, highlighting God's sovereignty and majesty over all things. Leviathan is described as a fearsome aquatic creature, symbolizing the magnificence of divine work and the humility required before God. In the end, the purpose of these descriptions is to remind Job and all of us that we do not have the right to question God's plan and wisdom, for he is worthy of our reverence, admiration, and worship, regardless of how mysterious or incomprehensible his creation may be. The Hebrew word for Leviathan indeed has its root in the meaning of coiled or twisted, which adds a layer of mystery to the description of this creature. References to Leviathan throughout the Old Testament, including the passage from Isaiah 27:1, portray it as a twisted and formidable serpent, a mysterious threat that people knew mostly through stories and legends. Psalm 104 verses 25 to 26 acknowledges the divine creation of Leviathan's habitat, emphasizing the grandeur of the sea and the diversity of life it contains. Leviathan is mentioned as one of God's creations, a magnificent and imposing being that dwells in the depths of the ocean. The idea behind this description is to highlight the magnitude of divine creation and God's sovereignty over all nature. The purpose behind the creation of Leviathan, as presented in the story of Job, is, as you mentioned, to teach the lesson of humility. God uses Leviathan to show Job and all of us our smallness and limitation in the face of the grandeur of his creation. Leviathan represents the vastness of God's creation and humanity's inability to control or dominate this wild nature. In Job 41, God details the untamable nature and strength of Leviathan, emphasizing the impossibility of it being subdued by humans. It is a creature that defies any attempt at control, symbolizing the humility required before God and his creation. The first mention of Leviathan in Job 3:8, in the context of curses uttered by sailors and fishermen, highlights the fear and threat that this creature represented to people who depended on the sea for their livelihood. It is a creature that evoked fear and respect, and its mention in this context underscores its unpredictable and mysterious nature. In summary, Leviathan is an enigmatic figure in the scriptures, serving as a reminder of the greatness of divine creation and the humility we must have before God and his sovereignty over all things. The description of Leviathan as a real and imposing creature in the scriptures, especially in the context of Job 41, indicates that God did not consider it a mythical creature. The mention of Leviathan in various passages of the Old Testament, as well as its detailed description as a formidable sea creature, emphasizes its reality in the minds of the ancient writers and readers. Regarding the precise identity of Leviathan, there are indeed differing opinions. Some argue that Leviathan could be an ancient dinosaur or a dragon-like creature that existed in antiquity and may have left a lasting impression on people's memories. Others suggest that Leviathan might be a powerful crocodile, considering the described characteristics such as its strength, impenetrable skin, and fearsome mouth. The term Leviathan is also mentioned in other contexts in the scriptures, like in Psalm 89, where it is associated with a sea-connected serpent called Rahab. This association highlights the idea that God has the power to subdue these creatures representative of imposing natural forces. The fundamental message behind the description of Leviathan in Job 41, as you mentioned, is to highlight God's sovereignty over all things. God demonstrates that he not only created Leviathan, but also dominates and controls it. This serves to remind Job, and all of us, that no matter how powerful or threatening creatures or natural forces may seem, God is in supreme control of all creation. The emphasis on the unity of Leviathan's scales, which cannot be parted, underscores the impregnability of its defense, symbolizing the incomprehensible greatness of divine creation. In summary, Leviathan is an enigmatic figure in the scriptures that represents the grandeur of God's creation and his sovereignty over all things, serving as a reminder of the humility we should have before him. The detailed description of Leviathan, with its scaly skin, terrifying teeth, and supernatural characteristics, indeed suggests that it is a creature beyond the description of an ordinary crocodile. The mentioned features, such as sneezes that emit light, eyes that glow like the eyelids of the morning, smoke coming from its nostrils, and fire from its mouth, highlight the impressive and supernatural nature of Leviathan. Furthermore, the description of Leviathan's invincibility, unshakable strength, and ability to make seasoned warriors flee underlines the power and grandeur of this creature. God uses the figure of Leviathan to convey to Job the idea that just as Leviathan is a formidable creature, God is the supreme creator, controller of all things, and nothing can challenge him or prevail against him. The symbolic link between Leviathan and Satan is intriguing, as it points to the idea that Leviathan represents not just a natural creature, but also may have spiritual connotations associated with pride and arrogance. God uses this figure to teach Job about humility before his sovereignty and the recognition that he is the only one who can control all things, including spiritual forces. In the end, the description of Leviathan and Behemoth in the scriptures serves as a powerful lesson in humility and reverence before God, reminding us of his greatness and sovereignty over all creation. These extraordinary creatures highlight the majesty and authority of God, calling us to acknowledge him as the supreme creator and Lord of all things. With the words of the book of Isaiah in mind, we are led to contemplate the majestic work of nature, where even the wild creatures recognize the grandeur of God. The jackals and owls, in their own mysterious way, pay homage to the Creator, for he provides water in dry deserts and streams in the wilderness to quench the thirst of his chosen people. God, the supreme source of power, transcends any creature, including the Nephilim. Angels have distinct origins and purposes from humans, and their interaction with mankind does not always follow the divine plan. The scriptures reveal a moment of angelic transgression when the sons of God gave into temptation by uniting with the daughters of men. This union resulted in an unnatural offspring, the mighty and famous giants of antiquity, who were notable for their demonic lineage. Though at first glance there seems to be no angelic or demonic involvement, the narrative of Job sheds light on the matter. God, speaking to Job, describes his grand creation, revealing his control over the foundation of the earth, its measurements, and even the cornerstone. He mentions how the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy, highlighting the magnificence of his creation and his sovereignty over it. Thus, as we contemplate these passages from the scriptures, we are urged to recognize the complexity and depth of the relationship between God, celestial creatures, and humanity, and how the divine nature manifests both in the majesty of creation and in the supernatural interactions that have shaped history. The understanding of the Nephilim and the interpretation of the context presented align with some traditional theological approaches. The idea that the Nephilim were the offspring resulting from unions between spiritual beings, fallen angels, and humans is an interpretation that has been debated throughout history. However, it's important to note that this is not the only possible interpretation, and there are different perspectives on the matter. The interpretation of Jude 6 as referring to marriages between spiritual beings and humans is also a valid theological view, though there are disagreements among scholars on how to understand this particular verse. The connection between the Nephilim and the increase of wickedness on the earth, leading to the flood, is a common interpretation, and many believe that the presence of the Nephilim was related to the corruption of humanity. Again, it's important to emphasize that different religious traditions and theological interpretations may approach this issue in distinct ways. The question of whether the Nephilim existed after the flood is a matter of debate, as you mentioned. Some believe there was a second occurrence of Nephilim after the flood, while others argue that the corrupt lineage was completely eradicated by the flood, and any subsequent mention of Nephilim can be interpreted symbolically or allegorically. Ultimately, the interpretation of biblical passages like Genesis 6 and the issue of the Nephilim depends on the religious tradition and theological beliefs of each individual or group. It's a complex topic subject to various interpretations within Christian theology and other religions that address these issues. Thank you for diving into this ocean of words with us. If you're captivated by this unique narrative, don't waste any more time. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join our community passionate about stories. Share your thoughts in the comments and embark on a journey that goes beyond words. Click now and discover more. Thank you for being with us, and until the next chapter.